up, Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, good morning, Badlandia. Welcome to Badlands Daily.
It really feels like the cat with the laser pointer. It's like you've led the cat up to the top of the building, and now you're leading it over the edge.
President Trump is rebalancing trade around the world and making things more fair for the American people.
I think that anytime the deep state can like over-capitalize in whatever situation they have, they're going to.
But the rest of it is a very well-organized and well-funded color revolution operation of the type they run all over the world again and again and again to destabilize entire society.
All right, good morning, Badlandia. Welcome to Badlands Daily. Joined today on this lovely Tuesday morning by my co-host here, Ghost of Base Patrick Henry, fresh off of GART. I heard you drove back, homie. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Yeah. Flight got canceled at like 11 Sunday night after it was a 3 o'clock flight after hours of delays. And then so I just rented a car and powered through and just drove through the night, got home at like 10 a.m.
Damn. What is that, like a 12-hour drive? 10-hour drive?
It's like 10 and a half and no stops. Yeah. But, you know, we made it. So, yeah. Yeah, man. How are you? How was your, I guess you drove like an hour to get home, right?
No, 2.5 hours, but it wasn't bad at all. I thought I was going to hit some traffic. It was a nice, smooth drive. Got to, the wife put in her AirPods and listened to her stuff. I listened to my stuff and good to go. Although she ended up listening to the show I was listening to. It was kind of funny, but yeah, it was a good time, man. I had a blast at GART and glad to be back home. Glad to be back in the saddle, getting this show going. Got a lot to talk about today. And it's beautiful out. I haven't run my AC since yesterday. It's nice and it's 45 degrees right now in South Florida.
Yeah, it's sunny and cold like that, like 45. But I mean, like a good cold, a nice cold. Feels good.
Heck yeah. All right, guys. Before we get started, if you have not done so yet, please smash that thumbs up. Happy Veterans Day, by the way, out there to the Army, Navy, yes, Air Force, and Coast Guard. To the Marines, take some Alka-Seltzer or drink lots of water, maybe a little OJ, because last night was probably pretty crazy for all of you. No, but happy Veterans Day to all the vets out there. Love you guys, and thank you all for your service. All right, yeah, so smash that thumbs up. And let's talk about our friends over at Chef IQ. Thanksgiving is right around the corner, guys, and cooking Thanksgiving is high stakes. It feels like one dried out turkey can ruin the entire meal, and that is why I will be using Chef IQ Sense this Thanksgiving. The wireless cooking thermometer takes the guesswork out of holiday cooking. The USDA says turkey's got to hit 165 degrees to be safe, and your eyes can deceive you. Chef IQ will ensure you that you hit that perfect temperature every single time, whether you're roasting, grilling, pan-searing, or even smoking the turkey. It's got you covered. It couldn't be easier. Just insert the sensor, tell the app what you're cooking, sit back and relax. Chef IQ Sense tells you when to flip, when to take it off the heat, and even how long to let it rest. Basically, it's like having a personal chef watching the stove so you can hang out with your guests. No more oven peaking, no more dried out turkey, just perfectly cooked meals every single time. And it works with steaks, chicken, fish, even potatoes, whatever you're cooking. You'll wonder how you ever cooked without it. Plus, it's the ultimate gift, perfect for the seasoned cooks, kitchen rookies, and everyone in between. And you'll get 30% off site-wide with promo code BADLANDS at chefiq.com. Again, that's chefiq.com, promo code BADLANDS. And let me just tell you guys, if you have not yet smoked a turkey for Thanksgiving, it is an absolute game changer. It is an absolute game changer. My father-in-law, first person to smoke a turkey in our family about 6 years ago, and we've done it that way ever since. It comes out like the most moist turkey you've ever had in your life. Even the white meat is like perfectly moist. Phenomenal stuff.
Hell yeah.
All right. And then, guys, today's show is also sponsored by SafePulse. SafePulse is dedicated to keeping you and your family healthy with top quality medications like amoxicillin, azithromycin, ivermectin, and hydroxychloroquine at unbeatable prices. The streamlined ordering process makes it easy to stock up on all of your health essentials. And now, with exciting news about fenbendazole showing promise in cancer research, they proudly offer that alongside antibiotics and other viral care meds. Don't wait. Prepare for any health scenario today. Get your supply and stay ahead of the curve with SafePulse. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/meds and use promo code SAVEHEALTH at checkout to get a 20% discount on orders over $100. Please note some packages have been held up in customs recently, and all those packages that have been held up are now en route to their destinations. All right. Let's get into the news. I want to start with something I had up yesterday. We didn't get to it, and it's the tariff battle that took place last week in the Supreme Court. And President Trump has been talking about this a lot over the last few days. And I want to play a couple. This is a first clip here of Justice Amy Coney Barrett calling out how this is going to work if the Supreme Court rules that what President Trump did was against the law, it was unconstitutional, and decides to rescind his ability to implement tariffs, which to me would take an act of Congress. But listen to the explanation this guy gives, what a shit show this would turn out to be.
And then if you win, tell me how the reimbursement process would work. Would it be a complete mess? I mean, you're saying before the government promised reimbursement, and now you're saying, oh, well, that's rich. But how would this work? It seems to me like it could be a mess.
So the first thing I'd say is that just underscores just how major a question this is. The very fact that you were dealing with this with quotas, there's no refund process to the tunes of billions of dollars or embargoes, but there is here. But for our case, the way it would work is, in this case, the government stipulated for the 5 plaintiffs that they would get the refunds. So for us, that's how it would work. Your question, I take it, is about everyone else. We don't have a class action or anything like that. With respect to everyone else, there's a whole specialized body of trade law, and it's in 19 U.S.C. 1514 outlines all these administrative procedures. It's a very complicated thing. There's got to be an administrative protest. There was a harbor management case earlier that this court was involved with in the United States Shoe, in which the refund process took a long time. There were any number of claims and equitable relief.
So a mess.
So it's difficult,
okay.
Absolutely. We don't deny that it's difficult, but I think what this court has said in the McKesson case in 1990 is that serious economic dislocation isn't a reason to do something. Northern Pipeline, you guys stayed your decision for a while in order to let the congressional process unfold. There may be a congressional process here as well. You may be able to also be that this court could limit its decision to prospective relief under the John Q. Hammonds case. So there's lots of possibilities.
The one thing I think that Katyal got right there is this is a congressional thing. This isn't a matter for the Supreme Court. Did Congress delegate this authority to the president or not? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Being able to say, well, we can just do it prospective, meaning in the future, we apply this and don't worry about what was in the past, what took place in the past. We'll just keep holding on to that money. This is a case that's widely propped up by foreign interests, right? This is not necessarily a U.S. interest, although there are corporations here that would like to see the tariffs go away because they've been exploiting that cheap labor overseas for years and years and years while, we turn into nothing more than a service industry. But I've got more on this, but I saw you pull something up. You want to talk about that? You're muted.
Sorry. Let's just look at this guy real quick because I know nothing about him. While we were listening to that clip, I just pulled his Wikipedia up and just skimmed it real quick. But there's some really notable things in here in his work history. Number one, he's a Jesuit from India. He was born in America, but his parents are from India. But he's a Jesuit, and so that fits a pattern that we have noticed of all of these Jesuit raised people who grow up and then put on a skin suit and then they pretend to be a Muslim mayor in France, or they pretend to be a Catholic leader in Europe, or they pretend to be a Jewish leader in New York City, or whatever it is. A lot of these Jesuits, though, do this. Not that this guy has put on a skin suit in terms of religion, but let's look at some of the things that he did real quick. So he went to Fordham Law School, which is a Jesuit law school. He wrote a report for Bill Clinton on the need for more pro bono work. In 1999, he drafted special counsel regulations, which guided the Mueller investigation of the Russian government's involvement to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. He represented Vice President Al Gore as co-counsel in Bush v. Gore about election integrity. He, let's see, he said he argued numerous cases before the Supreme Court, including the successful defense of the constitutionality of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He successfully argued in favor of the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. He acting as Solicitor General under Barack Obama. He replaced Alina Kagan when she went to the Supreme Court in that capacity. There were a few other ones that I saw that I wanted to hit on. Let's see. He was part of the prosecution team against Derek Chauvin. He represented Johnson & Johnson in 2022 when they were sued in a class action lawsuit concerning the carcinogens in baby powder. Billions and billions of dollars. I think Johnson & Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, I was talking about this with the Tamarack Gardens people this past weekend. I think they paid out like $80 billion. Fact check me on that, but I think it was something like that. And he billed them $2,500 an hour for his services on that. They just noted that here, but
it's nuts. I saw that $100 million in baby powder settlement.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff with this guy. And he has a lot of ties to the Obama administration, to the Clinton administration, to the deep state, working for these corporatists, these corporate interests. And then obviously he's been involved in some pretty significant legal cases, which is probably why he's involved in this one now. But yeah, this is this one's a really big deal. Trump is correct when he talks about how big of a deal this is. And ultimately what they are arguing for, the deep state is arguing for, is they're arguing for the right to suppress the American people and turn the American society, or at least maintain the American society, into a slave caste plantation. We are living on a tax farm as debt slaves. And the right to extract our wealth against our will, while we have no legal recourse, we have no political representation. This is going to be looked at. The future generations will look back on America right now as one of the most draconian and, I think, sinister governments of the past 100 years, including the greatest hits of people, the governments people like to point to. I just think that we live in a surreal reality where we're told that we are free and we have this great society. But the reality is the politics and the legal framework surrounding us prevent us from actually achieving anything of significance.
Yeah. And quick correction, it's 966 million. I don't know where that there's two articles I just
966 million. Okay. Something like that. Yeah. Gotcha.
That's nuts. It was the largest at the time, but I know there's been fines. I think Pfizer, was fined like $2.5 billion once upon a time back in the mid 2000s. A lot of these pharmaceutical companies, that's just the price of doing business for them, right? That's
it's a road bump. It's just a speed bump, and they pay the fine. And never mind the fact that all these babies had their bodies destroyed by their products. Like $1 billion. That's nothing for a pharmaceutical firm. And yeah, just the price of doing business. No criminal prosecutions brought against the people involved in this, the decision making. FDA hasn't been investigated for why they allowed this to happen. It's a criminal racket.
Yep. So President Trump addressed the tariffs a little bit more. He did it both through Truth Social and in person. He basically, said the same thing, reverberated the same, ideas on the videos. So I think videos are more entertaining. It's better to hear his voice than mine. So check this out.
Issues are ruling. It could be several weeks. Are you going to lay out any new additional tariffs?
I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to hope that we win. I can't imagine that anybody would do that kind of devastation to our country, you know, we'd have to pay back trillions of dollars. We've taken in trillions. We haven't taken in billions. We've taken in trillions of dollars. We've made trade deals based on that give us, as an example, European Union, $950 billion. Japan, $650 billion. South Korea, $350 billion. Without this, we're not talking about that kind of money. And they're okay. They're satisfied. They love us. I just left. They all love us. So it's not like we're such bad people. But they were doing it to us until I came along.
Right. They've been doing it to us the whole entire time. That is fascinating that, you know, President Trump has been over talking with these leaders and, you know, according to his own admission there's no pushback there whatsoever. But it's our own, you know, corporate oligarchs here that have been exploiting those systems that want to continue that exploitation of cheap labor, cheap goods, and bringing them over here and, you know, taking the largest consumer market in the world besides perhaps China and exploiting that.
That's the treason, by the way.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
When he says they've been doing it to us, it's not like that was a unilateral move. It's not like that was a move where these foreign governments, these foreign companies are doing this to us against our will, like against the will of our government. The leaders in our government, mostly Republicans, actually, because they are often the ones who are most involved in these trade negotiations. They're the ones who sold us out. The Republican Party sold us out, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a Republican-led initiative that Ron DeSantis voted yes in favor of 2 days before Trump announced his candidacy as president in 2015, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. You know, so these people sell us out every single day. As Marjorie Taylor Greene said, we get raped every single day by our government. It's the Republicans are the ones pinning us down while we are being abused. And yeah, a tax revolt, I think, is more than fair in terms of a suggested proposed solution.
Yes. Why should we make them pay? I love it. I love it. And here is President Trump talking about, giving some money back.
We're going to issue a dividend to our middle income people and lower income people of about $2,000. And we're going to use the remaining tariffs to lower our debt. We're going to be lowering our debt, which is a national security thing. So we're doing a lot of good work. And the numbers were reported so incorrectly. The real numbers are trillions of dollars have been taken in or gotten in terms of investment from the tariffs. And so if that were ever reversed, it would be a disaster. Frankly, it would be a national security problem for our country. And nobody thinks it's going to be reversed. I think we had a very good court case. As you know, it's before the Supreme Court right now. But if that were ever reversed, you know, people are saying, oh, it's $1 billion. Some people said, oh, it's $2 billion. Well, that obviously we can handle very easily. But this is trillions of dollars we're talking about in terms of the tariff income and all the investment income that's come into our country. You know.
Okay, so a couple things. First and foremost, I know some people are going to have a sour taste in their mouth from, you know, the stimmies, right? The COVID stimmies, $2,000. You get $2,000. Everybody gets. He didn't say they were stimmies. He said they were dividends. Dividends are, you know, obviously, Congress does not have to pass a bill saying, hey, let's give the American people $2,000 dividends. And then the Federal Reserve prints $2,000 and then you disperse that and you eventually pay that back through taxes. Dividends are surplus. That is, you know, extra. Now, the one thing that I don't agree with on this is that we should be using that to pay down our debt entirely. You know, like I totally understand what President Trump is trying to do here. And you know, he's trying to win over the American public and make people who wouldn't necessarily look at this the perspective of you and I and our listeners, and make people look at these tariffs as if, you know, they're a good thing, which they are. You know, if you can deviate from federal income tax and move towards a tariff-based system, that's going to alleviate a lot of stress off the American people. And he's doing that by giving these stimmies, right, that are actually dividends. So there is no long-term cost to this. But I personally would rather pay down the debt. But I totally can understand somebody, and I'm not opposed to somebody that says I'd rather take the dividend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, from an objective, like financial literacy standpoint, you're right. Like paying down the debt would be the like sound fiscal move. the only reason I would disagree with you is just because, number one, it's not like this is going to pay off. This would pay off the entire debt if we didn't do this $2,000 check to everyone. It's not like it's either pay off the debt or give everybody a check. I mean, you're talking about what, $700 million max? Or wait, no, it'd be way less.
Billion. If you send, so there's 140,000 taxpayers, right? Let me just do the math real quick. It's estimated. It's estimated 140 million taxpayers. Let's say, go ahead. Sorry, I'll let you talk.
Do the math and let me know how it comes out. But let's just say it's $1 trillion. Let's just go really high and say it's $1 trillion. I know it's way less than that, but even $1 trillion, that you're making a small dent in a fraudulent debt that we've acquired. And right now, at this point in time, this is a funny move by Trump, because he's out there. I think he's doing it to kind of provoke people and get people worked up. He does this all the time. But when he says that Marjorie Taylor Greene, he doesn't know what happened to her, because she's saying that the economy is definitely not fixed. Inflation is still out of control. There's the cost of living is still going up. She's 100% right. I've been talking about this with people like normies that I know for weeks now. The $2,000 check is probably way more useful to like the average family than our the Federal Reserve and paying down the interest on this. So that's why I would say that I think that, in considering it's a dividend and it's not coming out of tax dollars, which makes it different, I'd say it absolutely makes more sense to give it to families who need it, as opposed to who are living paycheck to paycheck and still not getting by, than to give it to a bunch of bankers who are the reason we're in this situation anyway.
Yeah, I totally get that, and I'm glancing through the chat, and I'm seeing people say $2,000 would pay my property tax, it would get my head above water. Same as the squirrel saying that. I totally get that. And the beautiful thing about this is there's no right or wrong answer. Now, I agree that getting the $2,000 would be much better, and I also agree that giving the money to the bankers would be counterintuitive to what our end goal is in all of this. So I'm with you. I guess perhaps I would go more towards giving the $2,000 as a dividend, meaning it's not money that's being printed. It's not extra money added into circulation. So there's not going to be any inflation behind it. Dude, this is going to be a very interesting step here. By the way, it'd be about $200 to $300 billion, assuming that it's about 120 million Americans that would get the $2,000.
Yeah, I mean that's nothing. You're not even making that's a flash in the pan for the national debt.
But think about this, Gordon. Like, if these get codified and we actually have long-term tariff revenue, the way that President Trump has been able to do it just in this short period of time, that can revolutionize this entire country. And when you look at, President Trump putting Andrew Jackson up in the Oval Office, it's not lost on me that he was the last president to bring the federal deficit down to zero.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, I think we should talk to John about this. We should organize like a panel of people, not myself, but people who actually know the financial system inside and out. I have a few people who I know who come to mind to understand who do we actually owe this debt to? Because I would make, just from a logical standpoint, I would make the argument that the debt, the interest payments on this debt was borrowed against the good faith and will of the American people. We are the creditors to that. They're lending against us, right? Technically, we should be considered the bank. Those interest payments should be coming to us, like the American people. So I would argue that the interest payments that are being made to the Federal Reserve should actually be going to the American people, since all of that money was borrowed by the politicians against us.
That's
yeah. So I would like to know, where does the interest payment go? Like who actually is the recipient of those interest payments? And my guess is it's probably London-based banks. That would be my guess, because they're the ones who probably actually hit the money printer button and printed the money and sent it out the door. But I would actually argue that all those interest payments should be going back to the American people, since we were the bank technically that made that loan possible in the first place.
Yeah. Let's take a look at this post that he put out on Truth Social. He says, so let's get this straight. The president of the United States is allowed and fully approved by Congress to stop all trade with a foreign country, which is far more onerous than a tariff, and license a foreign country, but is not allowed to put a simple tariff on a foreign country, even for the purpose of national security. That is not what our great founders had in mind. The whole thing is ridiculous. Our countries can tariff, other countries can tariff us, but we can't tariff them. It is their dream. Businesses are pouring into the U.S. only because of tariffs. Has the United States Supreme Court not been told this? What the hell is going on, President DJT?
It's so infuriating.
He's exactly right. So not only is President Trump creating a surplus and onshoring businesses back into the United States by using the tariffs to, reciprocate, the same tariffs essentially that they're charging us, sometimes more, but he's using them as a foreign policy bargaining chip as opposed to military force. He's using economic force, which, I think families across America are like, yeah, I'd much rather deal with, economic battles between foreign countries rather than sending my kids over there to do those battles. This is a win-win-win for President Trump and for the country as a whole. And it would be interesting, and maybe this is a conversation that, you, me, and maybe you and Matt, you above my pay grade. But in terms of what our founders, because, originally tariffs was given to Congress, Article 1, Section 8. It was a different world back then. The president wasn't traveling to all these countries and negotiating trade deals, negotiating, foreign policy and war, ending wars. So it's really interesting to me that these were delegated to the president by Congress, and now all of a sudden they want to pull them back once the tables are flipped, and the oligarchs within our own country are outraged by this.
Yeah, it's our economy is a precious thing. Our economy is a special thing. It's what makes America different from every other country in the world, and it's not just because of what the regulations are in place that regulate our economy, the rules. It's the people that make our economy, because we have the most entrepreneurial spirit. We have the American spirit, all the things that made America what it is, which goes back to the resiliency of the culture, the pioneers that bred America, that created America. Accessing that marketplace is a privilege. It's not a right. You don't have a right as a Chinese business owner to access our markets. You don't have a right as a Mexican business owner to access our marketplace. And you should absolutely have to pay a premium for that access. That access should not be universal, because we can't control the rules of your country. Meaning, unless you plan on abolishing slavery, abolishing the minimum wage, allowing the conditions for sweatshops and human trafficking and all of that, which I think we don't want, obviously, because it's all immoral and evil. That is allowed in several countries throughout the world, and those are the countries that the oligarchs typically go to for manufacturing, because they can take advantage of human capital. They can make goods for very, very cheap, and then they can flood our markets with cheap goods, destroy our small businesses, gut our middle class, and then guess what? All those business owners who had to close their shop now need a job. Who are they going to go work for? They're going to go work for the corporations that destroyed their job. And now you have an infinite workforce of replaceable drones. And if anybody doesn't like working for you because they don't like what you're offering, the next guy up will, and you don't have to worry about competing with the small businesses, because they can't make goods for what you can make them for, in Thailand or Cambodia or Vietnam. So this is all extremely sinister. Rand Paul is a absolute piece of shit for making the arguments that he's made. He knows better. He's obviously corrupted, owned by the cartels, in my opinion. He is a disgrace to his father, an absolute fraud, and as are all these other Republicans who are siding with him against Donald Trump.
I think you and I were talking about that at GART after the thing with Colonel McCullough, specifically about Rand Paul. It was somebody I was talking about, and they're like, "Yeah, how did he fall so far away from his dad?" No idea.
It's such a disgrace. He's such a disgrace.
It really is. All right, so let's get into the shutdown, because it's all but over now. They've agreed, but we got a speech on the floor, and there were two things that Dick Durbin, number 2 in the Democrat Party, two things that he said that I was just like, based. So check this out. First thing he talks about here is something we've been promised since January 5th, 2023, and that is single line appropriation bills. Although he doesn't go as far as saying the entire budget should be single line appropriations, but he does acknowledge at least a few here. Check this out.
After lengthy negotiations, an agreement was reached with the Republican Senate leader, John Thune. We will agree to open the government until January 30th, 2026. During that time, we will pass 3 bipartisan appropriation bills that will fully fund SNAP, WIC, and all the veterans programs, and finish our work on the remaining spending bills for this fiscal year.
Okay, so that's the first little clip right there. So SNAP, WIC, and the VA, we get single appropriation bills. We should have a single appropriation bills for the entire government, by the way. You should line item veto, right? This is nope. Get this one thing out of here. Okay, gone. You know, I've heard there's a lot of I guess they're trying to pass like marijuana reform in this now. They've thrown in that in there. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's getting thrown into this bill. It's an absolute shit show. They make it seem like it's, you know, identical to how it was, you know, the first time it was passed. These omnibuses are just loaded with pork, right? That was the big term in 2008 around Barack Obama when he first, you know, squatted in the Oval Office. That was the big thing. Like, get the pork out, get the pork out.
They're such communists, man. Like all of
I know,
them.
and nothing's changed.
Blood-sucking vampires is what they are.
And nothing has changed. And that's the unfortunate thing. So, you know, at least Durbin getting the single appropriations. Now, I would love to see when these single appropriations come down the line. Now we can have debate on it. Sure, you want to fund SNAP? Okay, then let's do something with SNAP. Let's dump SNAP as it sits right now. And I've said this many times. Dump SNAP. Everybody on SNAP, dump it right now. You got 3 months. Within the next 3 months, you got to re-register. You know, it's November right now. So on February 1st, SNAP is gone unless you re-register. And when you re-register, you have to show that you're a U.S. citizen. You have to show that you are searching for work, or that you're 100%, you know, totally disabled and incapable of working. You got to show that you're making, strides in your community to, you know, if you can't work, you're doing community service. You're doing something to contribute. You're not just sitting around and collecting SNAP, right? Same with
you can only spend it on like good food. You can't go and buy a bunch of junk. You can't buy cigarettes. You can't buy lottery tickets. You can't buy any of that crap.
Yeah, I was having a conversation yesterday, and somebody said, you know, but think about the kids, and like, you know, what if the kids want something like Oreos or something like? Well, first off, Oreos are atrocious for you.
Yeah, that's just cancer in a bag. Yeah,
that's all it is. And I think, you know, years ago when we were kids, it probably wasn't nearly as bad. But like, dude, you leave Oreos out for like a month now, and they're still fresh. I remember when I was a kid, like if you left the bag slightly unsealed for more than like 2 hours, they were stale. Now they're hard as a rock. You know?
It's because of all the chemicals and the preservatives they put in them.
Yeah, but my point is that, you know, SNAP is not meant to completely buy all of your food. You still have your own personal money. It's a supplement, right? It's I think that's what it stands for, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's not meant to buy everything. So if you want to buy Oreos or ice cream, and ice cream, you know, you might even put that on there because you can get like healthier ice cream. But either way, you know what I'm saying? I'm with you. It's, you know, shop around the outside, fresh produce, fresh meat, eggs, milk, cheese, flour, rice, you know, all the pasta, I guess, you know, but the healthier stuff, we don't have any requirements on this. It's just go out and get whatever the bleep you want.
Yeah. It's also crooked, and you know, and we've abandoned like the whole home ec thing and teaching kids in school, so young people don't know how to cook. Nobody thinks they have time to cook. I think Shipwreck does a great job with the videos I've seen of her showing people how easy it is to actually like wake up and make your kids breakfast. Like it's not hard or daunting. I mean, it's daunting, but it's not hard if you actually just go and put the effort in. Those are the sort of lessons that I think people need to be shown and taught. And you know, our culture is just totally rotten. Our culture has been taken from us, and the people who've taken it are these corporatists, the same people who don't want Donald Trump to do the tariffs. And then you look at the things that tariffs have actually achieved as a negotiating tactic.
Yes.
The greatest one, in my opinion, is being the one with Japan and Nippon Steel. right? Where they did the bait and switch where it was supposed to be a hostile takeover of U.S. Steel, and it ended up being a poison pill hostile takeover of Nippon Steel, where they are required to invest in every single steel factory in America, bring it up to standard. They have to hire everybody back. They're not allowed to fire anybody or lower wages or close down plants without the written consent of the U.S. president. And they went from what was it? Was it a $240 billion surplus? That was their projected revenue for this year. And now they're at like minus 60 billion for the year because of all the money that they are now forced to invest because of the negotiation that Trump made with them. The Japanese just totally had to surrender on that. And many such cases. I mean, you look at South Korea is another example, the one from 2 weeks ago. I looked at the fine print of that deal. 100 of the $350 billion they are investing in the U.S. economy, 150 billion of that is going to shipbuilding. So now you're creating a demand for all that steel that Japan's going to be helping us make, that we're making in factories in the U.S. Now there's a demand for the steel because now we're going to make ships with it. Obviously, the jobs market for everybody involved in the shipbuilding process. This is how you restart the U.S. economy, is focusing on manufacturing, specifically raw goods like steel that can then be sold to other countries, and then things like shipbuilding.
Yeah. Let's play this clip here. Now, this is a clip that is, just purely political divide, political rhetoric. I love this clip. Dick Durbin acknowledges that this entire thing and beyond the shutdown is an absolute attempt to obfuscate President Trump. Listen to this.
Many of my friends are unhappy. They think we should have kept our government closed indefinitely to protest the policies of the Trump administration. I share their opinions of this administration, but cannot accept a strategy which wages political battle at the expense of my neighbor's paycheck or the food for his children.
Did you hear what he said? My friends want to keep the government shut down indefinitely in protest of Trump's policies. Now, yes, Gordon shrugs like, yeah, sure, keep it shut down. I'm with you 100%. But the admission there, because now the narrative that's out there in the mainstream media is this is Trump's fault. This is Republicans' fault. They won't yield in any way, shape, or form to the Democrats' demands on this, which Democrats don't hold any power in our government right now whatsoever, other than the power to filibuster. But to admit that this is not just a protest of the Affordable Care Act getting subsidized extensions in the budget, but flat out to Trump's policy, dude, that is a bold admission for the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, Dick Durbin, to make there. But as I was telling you, Gordon, before the show, Dick Durbin knows that in reality, this is blowing back on the Democrats. They know that the public can only carry their water for so long, can only propagandize the people for so long before people actually realize, and I think they already have, that this is the Democrats' fault. And he's up for re-election in next year on November 3rd, 2026. And so, right. So he's got to play the moderate Democrat here and say, hey, we see what's going on, but I didn't expect him to make an admission like that, bro. He threw his whole party under the bus right there.
Well, you have to take the playbook of like everything you think you know about the economy and the government and all this and just throw it out the window. Because when you start digging into like the thing I just walked through with the Japanese trade deal and the South Korean trade deal and how they're working together, they're being leveraged together to stimulate the U.S. economy. Things that are not going to be felt by the American people for months because it's going to take time for all these deals to actually matriculate down and for the shipbuilding to start, right? I mean, that stuff doesn't happen tomorrow. But if you want to share my screen, here's another example of that, of something that sounds like it's one thing based on our history and our understanding, and it's actually something different. This is Scott Bessent being questioned about this $20 billion bailout of Argentina. And,
we talked about this.
Yeah, let's listen to what Scott Bessent says.
Amid this discussion of costs and prices and affordability, how does a $20 billion bailout of Argentina help Americans? You're the president's point person on that. Can you explain to those here who are feeling the pinch, including America's farmers, why the United States is helping out Argentina?
Well, do you know what a swap line is?
It's currency swap, yes.
Yes, but what is that?
You're the Treasury Secretary.
Yes, but why would you call it a bailout?
Doesn't know.
That is how.
In most bailouts, you don't make money. The U.S. government made money. We used our financial balance sheet to stabilize the government. One of our great allies in Latin America, during an election, the president there won in a landslide. The government's going to make money, and I would rather use peace through economic strength than have to be shooting at narco boats coming offshore if the government collapsed. We have a generational opportunity in Latin America to create allies. We just saw an election in Bolivia. We're probably going to see an election in Colombia. We've seen them in Ecuador. We're going to see them in Chile. So by stabilizing the economy there and making a profit, then that's a very good deal for the American people. And there's a lot we could have been doing for American farmers, but Democrats closed the government.
It's an interesting lapel pin. I don't know what that is in the flag. This little circle right here, but interesting.
Yeah, I can't see it.
I can't see it either. But, this is fascinating to me for a number of reasons. Let me just give me a second here. Scott Bessent is a very unique Secretary of Treasury for us because, as Burning Bright has explained, he's the guy who made George Soros his billions when he did this to Britain. He shorted the British pound years ago, and like 20 years ago, in this massive deal that maybe was 30 years ago for George Soros that was really, really bad for the financial markets in London, but was great for George Soros. And it's because Bessent was working for him. He was the hatchet man who did that. That's one of the most infamous deals that George Soros did, was the one against the currency manipulation against Britain. And again, this is stuff that's pretty much legal for the most part. Trump has been calling it out for years. 10 years ago, he was calling out China for doing this when he was running for president the first time, was doing the currency manipulation. Bessent doing this against Argentina is fascinating for a number of reasons. Number one, as he just mentioned, this isn't a bailout. We made money. This was an economic opportunity for us to make money. Stabilizing the Argentinian government financially is interesting because Argentina was the number one debtor to the IMF when Milei came in. I saw Mike Benz actually did a dive on this years ago where he speculated that Milei was actually a bad guy. He was actually an agent of the IMF who was sent in to basically privatize everything with the Argentinian government so it could be bought up by the IMF, privatized, and then the IMF would literally own Argentina. And that's why when he was doing fuego, 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 what he's doing is he's privatizing. Yeah, he's privatizing every single one of those agencies so they can be chopped up and sold off to the highest bidder, which ended up being the bankers. So stabilizing the Argentinian financial system is interesting. Their economy is interesting because maybe you're staving off the IMF from being able to come in and finish their hatchet job. I don't know. Like, that's something I have to look into more. But I'm really, really fascinated by that. And then, of course, he talks about what we're doing in Latin America. We're performing surgery in Latin America right now. All of Latin America has been controlled by the CIA and the cartels, which is a corporate cartel and a human trafficking cartel, which is all the same thing. And it's a very, very obvious strategic military plot against that system if you're actually looking into it.
So Argentina is very interesting because like Gordon was saying, they were the biggest debtor to the or the borrower from the IMF. And a big chunk of that happened in 2019, right before the COVID shutdown. And so, of course, what happened after that, they defaulted on that, and they were just, beholden. They were in such debt to the IMF that their inflation rates were like in the triple digits, and more.
The notable thing that happened before Milei came in, the year before Milei came into office, their legislature passed a law saying nobody owes taxes this year, and they didn't service the debt that year to the IMF. And then all of a sudden Milei comes in on the magic carpet and saves the day. And that's why I think Mike Pence might be right that Milei was actually sent there by the IMF to do the opposite of what he presents himself as doing.
So just real quick to add on to what you were talking about with in regards to Bessent there, the $20 billion is only half of it. It was actually $40 billion. And the other $20 billion, so there's $20 billion from the U.S. government that was a currency swap where we'll get a return on investment. I talked about this when we covered this like 2 weeks ago. President Trump also used this, by the way, to get favorable people in Argentinian Congress, right? Because Milei's party was up for re-election, in an election, and Milei has not had favorable legislators his entire first term. So a lot of people speculated that Trump was doing this to bolster, the election, the support for Milei in the election. But so 20 billion was a currency swap. The other 20 billion was private investment. And I believe one of those massive investors were the Saudis. So I'm wondering, and I don't know this to be true, I'm just piggybacking off what you said. If Milei broke the system down so that the IMF could come buy it all up, is that what the 20 billion from the private investors is doing, buying it up and getting away from the IMF and putting it in the hands of private investors? I don't know.
That's fascinating, and I haven't looked into it, but your speculation that the Saudis are involved would make sense and follow a pattern because they've been going around paying off people's debt to the IMF, including Syria. They paid off Syria's entire debt to the IMF, and I think the plan was for the IMF to come in and basically requisition everything in Syria because they were going to claim that they were owed those assets. But instead, the Saudis came in, paid off the whole debt, and then asked Trump to lift the sanctions on Syria so they could start investing in their economy.
Let me see if I can find this real quick because it shouldn't be. Yeah, I got it. Here it is. So this was the article that I covered. It's still highlighted because I love my browser. It keeps everything highlighted. The U.S. is also, hey, get out of here. The U.S. is also looking to provide an additional $20 billion to the Latin American ally through a mix of financing from sovereign funds and private banks.
Interesting. Yeah. So what obviously comes to mind is the Saudis for sure, and the Qataris maybe. That's really, really interesting. And, there's a really interesting timeline from November 2023 where a month after the October 7th attack, I posted about it only because I thought it was cool that they were hosting these people at the Rio, which is the suburb of Riyadh where the Saudis are from. It's an old ruin that they've converted into like a really cool conference center.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really care about CARICOM at the time, the Caribbean, like EU, but MBS was hosting CARICOM, which is all the Caribbean islands plus any country that has a coastline in the Caribbean, which includes all of Central America, Venezuela, Colombia. And then right after that meeting, that was when these militias appeared on the border of Guyana and Venezuela and started destabilizing Venezuela from the east. That felt like that was connected. Those two things were connected, where you had MBS meeting with all these people, including Venezuela, and then all of a sudden, and Guyana, and then all of a sudden these proxies show up and say, hey, we're going to destabilize. And it all has to do with the oil that's off the coast there and Chevron wanting access to it. And that's a different storyline, but there's a lot of interesting back and forth with Trump on that.
All right. Let's jump into, and by the way, I'm curious if you dig into that sovereign wealth fund that could be used in Argentina. I'd be curious to get your take on that. So keep that pegged for next week.
Mm-hmm.
But let's jump into this story from Just the News. The Obamacare secret at the heart of the shutdown. Insurers made billions at taxpayers' expense. We talked about this yesterday, but we got some more clarification on it. The nation's largest health insurance companies have seen good business since Obamacare was first passed in 2010 and fully implemented in 2014. This comes in no small part because of the federal government subsidies to the insurance industry, which government estimates now totaled $1.8 trillion with a T in 2023 alone. Those subsidies were greatly expanded by the Biden administration during the COVID-19 pandemic as an emergency measure, but Democrats have fought to keep them permanent. Again, this goes back to the whole give a mouse a cookie theory. You give these subsidies during COVID. This is only because of the oh so deadly pandemic, the one where 1 in 7 PCR tests were inaccurate, or excuse me, only 1 in 7 were accurate. So a grossly inflated quote unquote pandemic. That was meant to, subsidize us while our businesses were shut down. We had no income. But because you gave a large group of people something, a voting bloc, even though our elections are fake and gay, they're going to hold on to that. They're going to vote. You're never going to vote your way out of giving yourself free stuff, right? It's just that's the way human nature works. I know a lot of us think differently, and we can think about the whole of the country rather than the individual. They can't. So reading on, it says 4 of the nation's largest health insurance companies, their net earnings ballooned by 216% from 2010 to 2024. The United Health Group saw the largest explosion in profits. The weighted average of health insurance stock price has grown by 1,032% since 2010. 1,032%. So when you see their profits ballooning 216 from, in 2010 to 2024, you're like, okay, you've doubled your profits, maybe a little more than double. You tripled your profits, I guess, at 216%. But 1,032% in the stock. How much did the CEOs and the executives and everybody else that has, holdings in that company, how much did they make?
Yeah. So, and you got to remember, Obamacare was supposed it was pitched as standing up to the insurance companies, right? That was the whole point. Meanwhile, the entire thing was actually written by the insurance companies, and it was actually targeting small insurance companies, the mom and pop insurance companies, which got destroyed. And then the big companies came in, bought them all up, formed monopolies in every state. And that is the new health insurance system. And it is an absolute fraud. And this is just definitive proof.
Yep. And by the way, that's the weighted average of all the companies, meaning some of them went well higher, way higher than that 1,032%. By comparison, the most popular S&P 500 exchange traded fund only grew 251% and then 139% from 2014 to 2024. Jump down here. Individuals associated with United Health Group contributed a total of $742,000 to Kamala Harris in 2024, dwarfing the $158,000 received by Trump. Centene contributed $225,000 to Harris and only $22,000 to Trump. Cigna sent $265,000 to Harris compared to $99,000 to Trump. So you can clearly see, the number of donations going to the Democrats in this case, because they're the ones that are going to continue the subsidization of health insurance companies by the Federal Reserve. The data shows that nearly 12, and this is just how ineffective it is or how unnecessary it is, right? They always tell us 50,000 people are going to lose health insurance. The data shows that nearly 12 million enrollees, 35% of all people enrolled in Obamacare, are actually zero claim enrollees, meaning they've never even used it. 35%. Paragon found the average profile of these enrollees is someone who is healthy and likely does not need full coverage for care. So that brings us back to Maha. By the way, those 35% that are getting these subsidies, that's free money for the insurance company. That is literally money that
they leverage that data to get money from the federal government, right?
Right. That is exactly. They put that in there. 35% of those people, some of them may actually lose their insurance, but they never needed it in the first place, right? Insurance, I mean, great. You got to have insurance, right? It's there because you need it, right? When I say you got to have insurance,
for some things, yeah.
I'm being tongue in cheek. I mean, if you take your homeowner's insurance and you take your car insurance and all that, and you put that into, a decent hedge fund instead of into the insurance company, you'd probably have enough money to pay for anything that happened if you go 2, 3, 4 years without anything happening. But if something happens 3 months in, 5 months in, the severity of whatever happens, I get it. But that's just pure profit for them. Pure profit. Did you want to add something on that?
I just can't help but wonder what's going to happen with the insurance industry. The insurance industry is an interesting one. I know a lot of people who work in that industry. It's a very lucrative industry. It's a great, if your goal is to maximize your earning potential, the insurance track has actually become very attractive over the past 15 years. Whereas before, it was the specialties, it was lawyers, doctors, all that. But now it's finance, it's insurance, it's speculation-based jobs, or you're gambling basically. And that's what a lot of these underwriters do, is they are looking at it, they're evaluating a set of data, whether it's looking at a homeowner or a car owner or whatever. And it's, what are the chances that we're actually going to have to pay something out to this person? What are the chances that this person's going to make their monthly payments for the next 20 years, et cetera? Like, those are the calculations they're making. And then they place a wager based on that speculation. It is literally gambling.
Yep.
And then those underwriters get massive annual bonuses based on how well they gamble. Like, what are the actual payouts from the loans they're underwriting, or the insurance plans they're underwriting. All that those people, I would imagine, they're all going to be replaced by AI in 5 years, because why pay somebody a 6-figure salary plus a 5-figure annual bonus, and then when you can literally just get an AI to do 10 of their jobs, and then maybe one guy comes in and reviews everything and makes sure, a human makes sure that they didn't make it, that it didn't make any mistakes. How far away are we from that, right? So, like,
are we already there?
That's going to disrupt the insurance industry, I think, as much as anything else, because what insurance, the insurance industry, it's a money grubbing, highly greed driven industry. Why would they keep their employees around if they can just use AI to do their job?
100%, man. I think they see the writing on the wall, and that they have to continue this system. The executives obviously aren't going anywhere, but the underwriters, the people that are doing these assessments, they're all gone. There is going to be a massive shift. This is something we talked about at GART. There's going to be a massive shift in the United States. It's already underway, but it's going to continue. And insurance is not safe from it. Nobody's safe from it. President Trump truthed this out, and just to show you the actual numbers here, let me pull this chart up and just look at these numbers. United Health Group, March 2010 stock price $25. November 2025, $327. Cigna, $32. November, $295. Anthem, Elevance, March 2010, $61. Today, $318. Humana, $47, $279. Molina, $15, $147. I mean, these are astronomical numbers.
Show me any other industry that has that kind of growth. Show me like, compare that to a company like Apple that actually has like innovation and is developing things like the iPod and then the iPhone, and how it performed after that. Where they're actually doing innovation and providing a product that people want. Compared to that, I'd be very interested to see what their stock price did on the back end of the iPod being released, the iPhone being released, versus Obamacare in the insurance industry.
I did actually see something one time, Gordon, that if you bought instead of buying a new iPhone every single year since its inception, when the iPhone was released, if you bought a share, if you put that money into Apple stock, you'd be worth like over $1 million today.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But they're actually developing products that are innovative and people are desire, and that drives market demand. The insurance thing is like the government regulating it and saying you have to have this thing, otherwise we're going to come after you.
Yeah, and
communism.
And insurance companies literally profit. They make their profit off of the backs of people. They make their profit off of people being sick, off of the medical industry itself. You would think that it's like a symbiotic relationship, but it's not. You would think that there's, it is. You would think it would be more parasitic, right? You don't want people sick if you're a health insurance company, because you're going to be paying out, a lot of money for that, but it goes the opposite way. So here was President Trump's solution. And I want to know more about this. I am genuinely curious about what he's talking about here. President Trump truths out, I'm recommending to Senate Republicans that the hundreds of billions of dollars currently being sent to money-sucking insurance companies in order to save the bad health care provided by Obamacare be sent directly to the people so they can purchase their own much better health care and have money left over. In other words, take from the big bad insurance companies, give it to the people, and terminate per dollar spent the worst healthcare anywhere in the world, Obamacare. Unrelated, we must still terminate the filibuster. which there he is with the filibuster again. So I'm actually
he's been going hard against the insurance companies, by the way, for the past week. I love it.
Yeah, I don't get that. I don't get that, but I do. I'm curious about the idea because it's kind of sounding like socialized medicine, but it's also taking away the insurance companies, which, are driving up these astronomical prices. So,
I mean, I would make a similar argument just logically, like I did with the servicing the debt. It's like that money that they generated was done off our backs because it was required by the government for people to sign up for insurance. If you didn't, you get in trouble. If you didn't, they will come after you. They will fine you. They will send you to collections, like all that stuff. So, all that money that was generated technically belongs to us, technically belongs to the American people. That's not a communist idea, collectivist idea. That is just what is right and what is wrong. I don't know what he means when he says that. I think it's really interesting. I'd like to see that adjudicated, but I also would love to see the entire industry investigated for all the criminality they're engaged in.
Yeah, 100%. Palin Republican in the chat says, I do billing. UHC is the worst. United Healthcare is the worst. And that's the other crazy thing is like, they like just, and correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but they have like, they can just deny claims. Just, we don't want to pay that. Essentially. I mean, obviously, and your choice to that is to litigate them. And it's, dude, it's such
who has money for that? Who has money to go to lawfare against insurance companies who have the best lawyers, right? I mean, they're going to crush you in court because they have better lawyers than you can afford. And it's on top of all that, you have this system like Virginia. They recently passed a law under Youngkin. They passed a law that made it illegal because people, these local journalists were doing investigations and realizing that these big health networks were allowing third-party doctors to cut, like people who are based in Illinois to bill people. Like you go to the hospital for whatever and you talk to one doctor, and then all of a sudden you're getting bills from 5 or 6 other practices who were like, oh, well, I came in while you were asleep and looked at your chart for 5 minutes. So that's $1,200. And like you owe me, and like your insurance isn't going to cover that. So you're going to pay me $1,200. And if you don't, I'm going to send you to collections. So that was happening. Like that grift was happening to such a degree that the Virginia legislature actually had to get involved and make that illegal, that you're not allowed to do that anymore. Now I think it's still probably happening to some degree, but it's insane that you're allowed to do that. It's insane that a California-based physicians group can send a bill to someone who went to a hospital in Virginia and claim that somebody who worked for them came into your room, didn't actually make contact with you, but because they looked at your paperwork and then left, you now owe them whatever, $500 cash. It's so criminal, but that's just one of the many examples of how corrupt the medical industrial complex is.
Yeah. Palin Republican said, I do the fighting for you with denials that should be paid. In extreme cases, you would get a lawyer. So keep fighting. We need people like you. Kurt K asked how giving the money back would be socialized medicine. I said it would be like socialized medicine. It wouldn't exactly be socialized medicine, but if the government is giving you money to buy insurance, then it's almost the same thing as the government giving you the healthcare. They're giving you the money to buy the healthcare as opposed to giving you the healthcare. And again, that's why I want to see how he would plan on rolling this out, because it's not clear what the plan is here. It could be something that's awesome. I heard about putting it in an account. I think if you could put the money that you put into insurance, if you could have it held in like a thrift savings plan, like the government, like MTG was talking about with SHIP last week or 2 weeks ago. If you could, and I had TSP when I was in the Marine Corps. I loved it. You got like 10 to 20% return. It was insane. I would be all for that if you could find a way to privatize your investment and have it there. But
compare it to the school voucher program, because think about it. The school voucher program, you're giving a set amount of tuition money to every student, right? The money follows the students, and then the families decide which school they're going to send their kid to. That means the schools all have to compete to make their school offer the most value for the money, right? So then the schools have to improve themselves, and if one school is not towing the line, that school gets no students. That school goes out of business. Same thing here. The insurance companies have to offer a product that people actually want. And the person who comes up with the most creative, attractive idea, like what you just described, they're the ones who are going to get all the business. Maybe one insurance company gets all the business because they're the only one who actually come up with a clever plan, right? So it's not the same thing as socialized medicine because it's not the government actually doing it. It's the marketplace deciding who the winners and the losers are. The question will be what's the regulatory environment that determines how that money is spent, right?
That's a great point. The school voucher, because I've looked at that program and I broadly agree with that program. So I like that. The other option, and I was thinking about this morning, is like a natural monopoly with the healthcare, not with the insurance, but with the healthcare itself. And this is kind of getting closer, I would guess, to socialized medicine. But your utilities companies are natural monopolies, right? In Florida, we have FP&L. They're the only electricity provider that you can get for utilities. They have to charge, and they're very profitable, but they have to charge a regulated price, right? They can only charge so much. Maybe that's something that needs to be done with healthcare. You make these hospitals a natural monopoly. You give them kind of broad abilities to expand and kind of run everything, but at the same time they're capped. You can't be charging $40,000 freaking dollars for an MRI. That really only costs you maybe a couple $1,000 at most.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but the reason that's driven is because it's that those all of that is subsidized by the government. And so if you don't subsidize that anymore, if you don't tell the insurance companies we're going to reimburse you when you pay for that, when you cover that, now the impetus is on the insurance companies to go fight with the hospitals and say, why are you charging me $40,000 for this? Let me see your books. I want an itemized receipt. I want to know every person involved. I want to know the man hours. I want to know the equipment costs. That is then an argument between the insurance company and the hospital, which is how it should be. And let the insurance company fight that battle. But that, the laws of the basic laws of economics say that in a true free market system, companies will compete for the dollars that are out there, which means these insurance companies will find ways to make their program and their product attractive. And they will also find ways to save money on the back end by fighting with the health providers to make sure they're not getting inflated bills from the hospitals.
Gotcha. Patrick Manuel says they're not, that they have Teco over in Polk and Tampa. Well, maybe it's regional then. I thought Florida Power and Light had all of, besides the Panhandle, I thought they had all of Florida, but if it's just regional, either way, in Broward County, Miami-Dade, and Florida, and Palm Beach, we don't really have options outside of FP&L. Oh man, there was one other point I wanted to make, and I can't remember what the hell it was. Probably a good time to move on then.
Apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. I thought of it while you were talking. All right, we'll move on. Let's jump into this story here briefly. CNN, Trump asked Supreme Court to overturn the verdict that he sexually abused and defamed E. Jean Carroll. He asked the Supreme Court to review the $5 million civil case that found he sexually abused and defamed Carroll. Trump has claimed that Judge Lewis Kaplan, a very familiar name in the Trump sphere, made numerous errors by allowing the jury to hear testimony from two women who alleged Trump sexually assaulted them years ago and should not have let the jurors see the Access Hollywood tape. That's the famous one where he says that he gropes and kisses women. That's how CNN phrases it, like that's a bad thing. Quote, there were no eyewitnesses, no video evidence, and no police report or investigation, Trump wrote in the Supreme Court appeal. Instead, Carroll waited more than 20 years to falsely accuse Trump, who she politically opposes, until after he became the 45th president, when she could maximize political injury to him and profit for herself. And I do want to just highlight this clip here because it's probably my favorite clip ever, where this woman is just an absolute nutball.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy.
Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
We're going to take a quick break. If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Fault, isn't it?
Oh my God, clip, bro! Anderson Cooper's like, "Oh, what the hell did she just say?"
I'll be right back.
I'm out of here. We got to take a break. And then what is she? She doubles down on her craziness.
We'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It's like she's from Central Casting or something. She called the cat vagina. Okay,
tits and vagina, I think, wasn't it?
Something like that.
I
Yeah.
think it was tits and vagina. She has a bar, like a guest house where she has mice that live in there, and she named them all, and they have like rooms. This woman's a nutball. She lives on an island by herself. She's an absolute nut.
Yeah, definitely crazy.
And she hijacked the entire Trump story from Law and Order. Almost the entire story. You know, that is still to this day, that has been a case that's always bothered me. You cannot have a defamation case or make a claim like that if you cannot provide the date and time or just the date so you can defend yourself, so you can form an alibi and defend yourself. And President Trump is a person who every move he makes since he was, since the 80s, maybe even before that, everything's documented. He has secretaries and assistants that document he was here on this day, he was there on this day, he met with this person on this day. And so if E. Jean Carroll came up and said, well, it was the week of December 1993 that he did this, Trump could be like, no, it wasn't. I was in Russia. He was hanging out with Putin. All right, let's move on. Let's jump into this story. Just the news. Appeals court bans punishing students for using biological pronouns, calling it not disruptive and harassing. This was in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, where they issued a preliminary injunction that bans an Ohio school district from, quote, punishing students for the commonplace use of biological pronouns as distinct from, quote, the abuse of transgender students in violation of harassment policies. SCOTUS makes it clear that, quote, the district may not restrict personal speech on matters of public concern unless the speech would materially and substantially disrupt school activities or infringe the legal rights of others in the school community, said Judge Eric Murphy, citing 1969 precedent in Tinker. The district introduced no evidence that the use of biological pronouns would disrupt school functions or qualify as harassment under Ohio law, and that it, quote unquote, may not skew the wider societal debate about transgender rights by forcing one side to change the way it conveys its message or by compelling it to express different views, end quote. This is the most important part, I think, of this whole entire ruling here, and this is the dissent opinion, and I will keep this dissent in the back of my mind for future election cases, because this is something and just cases in general, this is something that has always concerned me about taking action before there's injury. Judge Jane Stranch's dissent countered that, quote, school officials must merely demonstrate that the school reasonably forecast that disruption would occur based on the speech at issue, rather than, quote, wait for a disturbance before regulating speech, or even be certain that that disruption will occur. So in other words, and the reason I think that's so significant is she's advocating for being able to bring litigation in the event that something could occur and not having an injured party to bring that litigation. And that's something that we've dealt with in elections for a long time. Like they say, well, you're not an injured party. I know, but this could happen. Well, it hasn't happened yet, so sue after it happens. Now, all of a sudden, transgender rights, the judge is like, well, it could happen, so maybe we should consider, doing this.
Yeah, and this is such a silly topic. We mock the Daily Wire and the Daily Weimar and Ben Shapiro all the time for being the number one trans content provider on the internet, because they've just been obsessing with trans stuff for like the past 10 years, and they're the ones who really keep this conversation alive. But what makes this, just to me, from like a just objective, logical standpoint, the Obamacare thing was a precedent because, as my history professor explained to me, he was like a Russian history professor, extremely based in college. He said why the Obamacare thing is significant is it's the same as Peter the Great in 1700 passing the beard tax in Russia, because he was trying to Europeanize the Russian people. And so if you kept a beard, which all Russian men did, you'd have to pay a tax on that. You are taxing behavior. You're taxing people for having a passive position. If you don't go out and get health insurance, you're not going to pay a tax for that. That's the first time in American history the government's ever done that before. This is the same thing, because what you're regulating is you're not regulating the behavior of the plaintiff. You're regulating the behavior of everybody around them. You're regulating their behavior by saying, if you don't comply with this person's fantasy, whatever that fantasy may be. In this situation, it's men fantasizing about being women because they're mentally ill. But tomorrow it could be men fantasizing about being a dolphin, right? I mean, it could be anything. You're opening Pandora's box here by regulating everyone else's behavior and forcing them to comply with your sick fantasy, your twisted fantasy. It is insane that it's even gotten this far, but it is what it is. This is absolutely a Marxist, subversive Marxist play, because they want to control language, they want to control thought, and they absolutely were doing this stuff in Weimar Germany in the 1920s. The transgender stuff, the cross-dressing, and then the really, really gross sexual perversions, all of that 1920s Germany.
Yeah. Well, and again, just to be clear, the Sixth Circuit got it right here, and not, censoring speech, free speech. That the preemptive, right? The possibility that this could occur, that was in the dissent. So I just want to keep that fresh in mind, so that if the Sixth Circuit ever hears, an election case and the Democrats are like, well, it hasn't happened yet, well, the GOP can just pull that one, or the conservative justices, or judges in that court can pull up Stranch's words right there and use those. This is interesting here. From the Times, transgender women to be banned from all female Olympic events. Why is this interesting? Because this is a complete, kind of shift in the whole transgender movement that's been shoved down people's throats, like you were saying, over the last 5-6 years, even further back, and they're completely switching on this now. And listen to this boneheaded, explanation. The International Olympic Committee is set to announce a ban on transgender women in female competition early next year after a science-based review of evidence about permanent physical advantages of being born male. You guys needed science for this? You couldn't just look?
Well, they are retarded. You have to give them that. They are mentally ill. You are talking about a bunch of mentally ill, intellectually deficient people. So
until now, transgender women could compete with reduced testosterone levels and left it up to the individual sports to decide. The committee's medical and scientific director, Dr. Jane Thornton, presented the initial findings. The presentation stated that scientific evidence showed physical advantages to being born male. Quote, it was a very scientific, factual, and unemotional presentation, which quite clearly laid out the evidence, according to one source in the meeting. You guys you needed science to tell you that men have bigger lung capacity, thicker bones, more dense bones, more muscle mass. They're taller, they're stronger. You needed science for that.
Yeah. They also needed science to tell them to wear that a cloth paper mask that they keep in their pocket for 3 months is going to somehow keep them healthy. I mean, again, we're dealing with Darwinism in reverse. It's insane.
Yep, 100%. And the last thing before I kind of hand it over to you here, we got rid of Nancy Pelosi, but we're getting Christine Pelosi. She's running for California State Senate.
Oh God, no.
So just when you get rid of one Pelosi, you got the other one right back. And then I'm going to kick off the geopolitical segment here, because I saw this yesterday and I thought this was fascinating. 2 clips here. This is Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the Knesset. And in this first clip here, he's going to remove a member and make a very veiled statement at the end here. And it is in Hebrew, so I'm going to read it to you guys. He says, throughout history, it appears in waves. And then, well, actually, you don't need to hear this part. So let me just play it with the volume. They're kicking somebody out. First warning, get out of here. Second warning, get out of here.
חברת הכנסת מירב כהן, קריאה שלישית. נא לצאת. תודה. אין צורך בעזרה. תודה.
Now Netanyahu says, I intend to answer her question. And then he goes on to say, a little patience. Secondly, I saw that many of these claims came from members of the Yesh Atid, and we'll see if Yesh Atid has a future. And that was a little bit interesting. But this is do you want to comment on that before we get into the fire one?
Yeah, Yesh Atid is the centrist party led by Yair Lapid. You've heard me talk about Yair Lapid.
Mm-hmm.
Yair Lapid was a news anchor in Israel. He became famous, and his public personas are built around that. And then he turned politician. And so he's one of the people who I think is most likely to become prime minister if they were to hold a vote today. I mean, just based on public mandate and support. Him or Naftali Bennett, maybe Benny Gantz. So interesting that these people are from the quote unquote centrist party, not the right or the left.
Yeah. This is something that I forgot. I wanted to mention this earlier, and I keep forgetting between segments, so I'll do it right now. I said earlier that Dick Durbin's running in 2026. His seat is up in 2026. Somebody corrected me in the chat that he's not actually seeking re-election, but his seat is still up, and they're still going to defend that seat. So, in terms of Durbin throwing his party under the bus, he's still protecting that seat with moderate Democrats. All right, but so here is, and let me make sure I get her name right. Her name is MP Lazimi, MP being her designator in Parliament. Lazimi, I can't remember her first name, but check this out. This is posted by RT. And I wonder how I should do this because again, it's in Hebrew. So I'll just read you guys what she says.
Yeah, just read what she says.
Because somebody actually put a transcript. Her name is Nama Lazimi. She says, I accuse you, yet Netanyahu, I accuse you for October 7th, the greatest disaster the state of Israel has ever known, which happened on your watch. Even if you go to sleep with a clean conscience tonight, we will not forget. We will wake up at dawn and establish an international investigation committee against you. I accuse you for empowering Hamas, for building up terrorism, for closing our eyes to the existential threat bearing down on us, and for turning state security into just another political tool. Security is not a political instrument. Did you hear that? It stands above everything else. I accuse you, Netanyahu, for turning Israel's working people into slaves of the messiahs, for forging this unholy coalition of parties that serves only you. The war was shattered because of you, but the fault is not ours. This light, this hope, will be rebuilt without you. I accuse you for your personal corruption that has metastasized into a cancer on the entire state. Your voice has drowned out the people's voice. The bigger the stain on a leader, the more he hides behind it. One man's trial has swallowed an entire nation whole, like Bibi's endless kingdom of excuses. I accuse you, Netanyahu, because you have forgotten what it means to be Jewish. You released terrorists, robbers of life. Instead of heeding Trump, and without reason, you pushed him away when he warned you. Dozens of those released went on to murder and slaughter in captivity, all because you failed to uphold the sacred commandment of redeeming the captives. No discipline, no fear of God. I accuse you, Netanyahu. Corruption has always been your faithful servant. You have stolen from us from the inside out. You have turned half the nation into your enemies. So hear this, Netanyahu. I, the traditional Moroccan woman standing before you, tell you now, we will tear down Bibi's walls. We will clean up the filth you've spread across this land for 30 long years. We will return to being a united society, whole and strong. It was fascinating because there's like moments throughout this speech where you can see, I guess they have like a galley in the Knesset, and like you could see like people cheering up in the rafters. Like where is it? Here.
קום ועדת חקירה ממלכתית. אני מאשימה אותך בנימין נתניהו במימון החמאס, בבניית הטרור, ועצימת העיניים האיום הקיומי עלינו, בהפקרת ביטחון המדינה כמדינה.
All right, on that note, I'll hand it over to you, Gordon.
And just to provide some background, she's from what we would call now the Labor Party. Labor Party has been in many iterations. It's all these parties in Israel merge. The Labor Party was the original. This is the Socialist Party, was the original ruling party of Israel from 1947 until 1977. Every prime minister was a Labor Party candidate. So because of course Israel is a socialist state, has always been. We've talked about that before. And so yeah, they're kind of like the major party rival against the Likud and the Zionist parties. All right.
She calls herself a left-wing Zionist, by the way.
Yeah. And Zionism is not a right-wing thing over there. I mean, they're left-wing Zionists. The Labor Party people, they are open to a two-state solution. They want to sign a peace deal with Palestine, but they want a war with, many of them want a war with Iran. So, it's like, it's not the same as it is in America, where we're like, you're pro-war, you're anti-war. It's like you're pro some wars, you're anti-other wars. It's politics. I don't know. But anyway, so I figured we start here since we were just talking about him. Yair Lapid rips up corrupt WZO leadership deal, opens door for Yair Netanyahu appointment. This is from November 5th. Opposition leader calls to nationalize major Zionist organizations, saying they are deeply corrupt and currently exist just to create jobs for politicians' kin and cronies. The process of appointing new leadership roles at large Zionist institutions fell apart again on Wednesday when Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid announced that his party will no longer take part in any of the negotiations, decrying a system steeped in a culture of corruption and political appointments. Lapid's move upends a long negotiated agreement that divvies up jobs at the major organizations like the World Zionist Organization and the Jewish National Fund, KKL, between supporters of the various political factions. It could ultimately reopen the possibility that Yair Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's elder son, will receive a plum executive role at the WZO. And kind of the thing I wanted to point out was that it says down here, so here's a picture of Yair Netanyahu. He's like a podcaster in Miami. Now he's 33, refuses to go fight in the war, even though he technically is under reserve status in the IDF. That has a lot of IDF soldiers upset. It says, at the last moment, it was revealed that Likud, MK, and Netanyahu loyalist Miki Zohar had included a cushy job for the prime minister's son, which comes with an office, a car, a salary commensurate with that of a government minister. So a very high paying salary, an apartment, like a car service that you call up and you say, I need my car. And then a driver drives you around. And these are all NGOs they're talking about, international NGOs, the same NGOs that are responsible for orchestrating the creation of Israel 100 years ago. The ones that orchestrated and facilitated the World Jewish Congresses in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that ultimately led to the Rothschilds getting involved and the Balfour Declaration of 1917. So these NGOs are extremely powerful, not just from a financial standpoint and their ability to give out jobs to Nepo babies, but also their ability to influence international politics, because they can literally create a country from nothing, which is what they did in 1947. So very interesting. And now there's like a civil war within their movement to nationalize these NGOs, and we'll see what happens. But I found that kind of relevant. There's this article, which we don't really need to dig too much into, from over the weekend, but this is not necessarily a news story. I think this is just like a new reporting of it. From Haaretz, losing the Republican base, Israel pours millions to target evangelicals and churchgoers. The Israeli government has signed contracts worth millions of dollars in recent months to rehabilitate Israel's standing in American public opinion, both online and offline. Amid a sharp drop in support from the conservative right, Israel has hired firms to conduct not just Hasbara, which is public diplomacy campaigns, but also campaigns targeting millions of Christian churchgoers, bot networks to amplify pro-Israel messages online, and efforts to influence both search algorithms and online discussion. So there you go. Like that's the propaganda. That's the Hasbara. Tens of millions of dollars being funded for that. It'd be interesting if that money was diverted to useful endeavors. Like I feel like that could be a really great win in the court of public opinion for Israel if they were investing in like American industry or jobs, but instead they're investing in the propaganda industry. So
I just real quick, I showed Gordon this morning an article that came out in a conservative outlet. We'll just leave it at that. And they have comments at the bottom, and it was a pro-Israel article, and I showed Gordon the comments, and they just got eviscerated in the comments. Absolutely eviscerated for that. So good.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you do have people just notice it, like everyone just realizes that they're dealing with propaganda now, and people don't like facing propaganda. So I'll do two more Israel stories, and then we can kind of pivot out of there. Ex-Trump ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, named NSO chairman as spyware firm shifts to U.S. ownership. This is really interesting. So David Friedman was the Israeli Israeli ambassador during the first Trump administration. Now it's Mike Huckabee. Now he's becoming the NSO chairman. Now NSO is a very significant firm because they're the one who developed Pegasus, among other softwares. Pegasus is the software, the spyware that is licensed to pretty much every government on earth by the Israeli government, because they have ownership stake in NSO. I think they're majority owner of NSO. And Pegasus is the software that turns on your camera phone, turns on your microphone, records everything you're saying, remembers your keystrokes, and pretty much like compiles like a profile of you based on your phone use, and allows intelligence agencies around the world to hack into your phone. So now this guy is going to be the leader of it, and it looks like, from what they're describing here, that U.S. ownership is now taking over NSO. It says right here, NSO's founders no longer hold any stake in the company. NSO, of course, was founded by former Mossad agents. Very, very interesting. And it's worth noting that as NSO has been sued multiple times over the past couple of years by a number of competitors, including WhatsApp, accused them of hacking into WhatsApp. And you know who was their defense attorney was Rod Rosenstein. I thought that was really interesting. So don't really know where this is going, but it is interesting that NSO is now shifting to U.S. ownership, and that the guy who's now running it was Trump's ambassador in the first term. I don't know if David Friedman's a good guy or a bad guy. He runs this pro-Israel media outlet now that puts out a lot of garbage and talks about does a lot of propaganda for the Israeli government. So I have no idea if he's a good guy or a bad guy, but take it for what it is. The other Israeli story, maybe we'll do, is this one. Ben-Gvir celebrates as death penalty for terrorist bill clears first legislative hurdle. So they have passed the first round of this bill that will allow them to effectively mass execute Palestinian prisoners. And they don't even necessarily have to be like Hamas terrorists. They can just be prisoners. And if they meet certain credentials, they can be executed and executed in mass, I think is what this bill is looking at. And Ben-Gvir, there was a really awful video of him running around the Knesset passing out treats, like, I don't know if some sort of Israeli dessert, but he was like laughing gleefully as they voted on this thing. And he was saying that how happy he was that they're going to finally kill all these people. A lot of them are women and children, by the way, a lot of these Palestinian prisoners. So I'm not at all convinced that these people get a fair like due process or anything. A lot of them are just grabbed off the street if they say the wrong thing to an IDF soldier. So we'll see what comes of it, but it just seems like this whole society just has a very, very backwards way of seeing things and is not at all consistent with American values, American culture, Christian values. And we just have to continue to highlight it whenever we see it. So, and then to that point, you have this story, which is more of an American story, but from the Jerusalem Post, Barstool's Dave Portnoy, anti-Semitism is every day now becoming far more prevalent. You may have noticed that over the weekend or yesterday, a story went viral where this guy who I think insulted Dave Portnoy months ago, threw coins at him and said something to him about being Jewish while he was filming something on the street. He was doing like his pizza review. That guy was arrested, I think, over the weekend. And Dave Portnoy is basically now calling for more of it, like calling for more people to be prosecuted for this sort of behavior. It's important to note that anti-Semitism has always been protected under hate law, under hate crimes, meaning if you commit a crime and then there is an element of what is it called? Discrimination attached to the crime, like you were motivated by because of their race or their ethnicity or their gender or whatever, then you get charged with like an elevated crime is charged. That's always been the case with anti-Semitism. We're now seeing calls by people like Mark Levin and others like him to crack down more on this stuff. And we just need to be aware of it, because while there are certain behaviors that I think should be prosecuted, it sounds like this guy was technically arrested for throwing coins at Dave and the coins hitting him and like disturbing the peace. I think that's what he was actually arrested for. It's the rhetoric surrounding it that I think is a little concerning, where they're like, we're going to target people who are anti-Semitic. And then you look at the definition of anti-Semitism now includes people who criticize Israel. And again, we've been talking about this for 2 years now. This is the direction everything's trending in. It's hate speech laws, but brought to you by the Republican Party. And it's the same exact nonsense that the Democrats were doing 5 years ago with black people, but now it's Republicans and Jewish people. And if you were anti-hate speech laws when the Democrats are pushing it, but you're pro-hate speech laws when the Republicans are pushing it, you are a moral relativist and really should adopt the first principles consistency and not be a moral relativist, because that is totally immoral. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. And then we will shift to the big meeting that happened yesterday, which was the meeting between Trump and al-Shara, better known as al-Jilani, from the Golan Heights. That's why his name is al-Jilani. This would be the former ISIS al-Qaeda leader, was welcomed as a legitimate world leader by the White House yesterday. First time a Syrian president has ever visited the White House. That's notable. Also notable that this television character, that's kind of what I think he is, made this visit on the 250th anniversary of the Marines and on Veterans Day. I thought that was a strange decision, but I think that was intentional. I think there was intent there, because a lot of people have pointed that out, that this former al-Qaeda and ISIS leader is visiting the White House on Veterans Day. Now, al-Jilani has come out and said, I had nothing to do with 9/11. I wasn't involved in any of that stuff. But that's the reason he had to come out and say that, is because so many people are pointing out that connection. But what was more notable than the most notable part about this visit, not only is he saying this headline from the Times of Israel is kind of bearing the lead. They're saying Syria won't enter talks directly right now with Israel on Abraham Accords. But what he did say is that they are absolutely open to joining the Abraham Accords and will consider it as they move forward, which, of course, Netanyahu does not want them to join the Abraham Accords, because if they join the Abraham Accords, Israel cannot conduct military operations against Syria anymore, which is what they've been doing for the past couple years, certainly since December when this guy came into power. But the real story about this visit is what happened here with Hakan Fidan. That would be the Turkish foreign minister. So on Sunday, the Turkish foreign ministry put out a note and they just said, oh yeah, by the way, our foreign minister is going to be at the White House tomorrow meeting with Trump and Syria. And the quote is, at a certain point in the meeting, we were invited to join. Fidan told reporters after his White House talks, which covered Turkey's stance on Syria, potential areas of cooperation with the United States, Syria's reconstruction and unity, and regional security. It says Fidan's participation in the Trump-Shara meeting came as part of his surprise visit to Washington on Monday. So nobody knew he was coming to Washington, and suddenly, right before he lands, a memo is sent out by the Turkish government saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, Fidan's going to be in D.C. tomorrow. Afterwards, he said he also met jointly with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Syrian Foreign Minister Assad al-Shabani, as well as Vice President J.D. Vance, to discuss steps to advance Syria's security and economic development. Why it matters, Turkish officials have kept a tight lid on Fidan's Washington visit, an unusual approach for a high-level trip to the U.S. Capitol. On Sunday, the Turkish Foreign Ministry announced the trip in a one-sentence statement without even specifying that Fidan would be traveling to Washington. The low-key approach aligns with Ankara's effort to present Shura as an independent leader rather than a Turkish proxy, a strategy aimed at reassuring regional powers and encouraging broader engagements with Damascus. Ankara emerged as Damascus's closest regional ally after the fall of the Syrian regime in December. Since then, Turkey has been working to boost Shura's global profile so he can consolidate power in Damascus while Ankara preserves influence over its southern neighbor. So yeah, this is a really, really interesting development. And again, a pattern of behavior going back to December, which started with Trump. Here's Trump in December 16th. He says Trump lauds ouster of Syria's al-Assad as unfriendly takeover by Turkey. Another headline by Trump would be this one. Again, from December 16th, from the same statement. And this is from Reuters. It says, Trump says Turkey holds the key to Syria's future. So this is Trump very directly before he came into office telling everyone Turkey is Syria's handler now. They're the ones in charge. Here is, we'll get back to that in a second. Here's Trump's Truth Social post about his meeting with al-Shura. It was an honor to spend time with Ahmed Hussein al-Shura, the new president of Syria, where we discussed all the intricacies of peace in the Middle East, of which he is a major advocate. I look forward to meeting and speaking again. Everyone is talking about the great miracle that is taking place in the Middle East. Having a stable and successful Syria is very important to all countries in the region. And if you go look at his Truth Social feed, it's just like dozens of pictures of him and Jelani like walking around the White House. Very strange because he didn't post that many pictures with all the other people he's met with. A lot of psyops on his feed yesterday. I thought that was interesting. And when he says that having a stable and successful Syria is very important to the countries in the region, that is a directive given by MBS many years ago, particularly May 20th, 2023, when he officially brought Syria back into the Arab League. They were expelled in 2011 by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. After the start of the Syrian civil war, MBS brought Assad back, gave him a big hug, said Syria is a critical ally and member of the Arab League, and we want Syria to be an Arab country, not a Persian country. So this is all, again, aligning with that agenda. I mentioned earlier how the Saudis paid off the IMF debt that Syria owes. Trump put a pause on the sanctions back in May after his trip to Saudi Arabia. That was a request by MBS to do that. And then Trump announced yesterday he's going to be extending those sanctions or the pause on those sanctions so that international money can invest in the nation of Syria. And I think the goal here is to keep Syria together as long as they need to get it stabilized and get it actually prosperous. At some point, there might be a discussion about a fracturing of Syria because there's different groups that have different interests, and whether or not, in the way that Syria was drawn up was pretty nefarious in the first place after World War I. But that is a discussion that should happen, I think, after all the prosperity and the economy has been restored there. Netanyahu and the Israelis want to carve it up into 5 countries right now. And that's because if they do that, it'll be easier to control each of those countries. But anyway, so there's a balancing act here where you want to rectify what the globalists did post World War I, where they arbitrarily drew these lines in the Middle East to create a destabilized Middle East. But you also don't want to give them exactly what they want, which is these small, weak little countries that are totally incapable of defending themselves from external influence. So I think that's the balancing act that Trump and the Saudis are working on right now in Syria, and the Turks holding the key to like being their protector is major. You're seeing the Turks now come in and occupy parts of Syria. Last week, I think we talked about last week how Trump submitted that draft resolution to the UN for the International Stabilization Force in Gaza. Turkey's going to be a critical member of that. The White House has made that very clear. Netanyahu has said over his dead body. But again, I think Turkey coming in Gaza and Syria is all about NATO and Article 5 and using that as a deterrence to the IDF. Do not come and mess around, because if you do, you'll find yourself at war with all of Europe and the US.
That is absolutely fascinating. I didn't think that we'd ever have a Syrian leader sitting in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
That was nuts to me. I told you before the show, and this will be my only contribution. It's not lost on me that President Trump had that B-2 bomber on his desk, and also that it's pointing right there.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
It is fun. It is funny. My speculation is, and this is just intuition. I don't know, but it seems like this guy Jelani was probably a television, like literally a television character, like the character from Iron Man 3. Like literally, I think he was a television character that was used by the CIA in their television productions to sell the idea of like Al Qaeda and ISIS. And then somebody got the idea that we were going to start a new war in Syria in December. And if you could imagine if Assad hadn't backed down, if he just stayed in power, and there was a fight between these rebels in Syria starting, and Assad starting in December, that was still going on right now, that would have destabilized the entire Middle East. The fact that Assad just stepped down and walked away is what prevented a massive war, I think, from breaking out in Syria. And I think that was a rug pull. And I think this guy was their guy, kind of like Zelensky, but is now our guy. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't know if you have anything else to share on that. I do have a pretty interesting video from Petro that I think we should watch.
Sure.
Let's see. Where are we? Here it is.
Do you not have a Truth Social account?
Oh no, I do. It's logged into a different browser, and for some reason, Brave won't let me log in. It's very weird.
Gotcha.
So yeah. Anyway, this is in Spanish, so I'm gonna silence it and I'll read what he says. This is the president of Colombia. He has been presented as a opponent to Trump, like aligned with Maduro, but he's also, as I shared a few weeks ago, he's been rounding up and arresting thousands of cartel members in Colombia and then extraditing them to the United States. So clearly he's actually working with Trump, despite the public narrative refuting that. Here's what he says. A clan of pedophiles wants to destroy democracy in Colombia. Harsh, yes, but that's the reality. And to keep the list from coming out, they send warships to kill fishermen from this city and threaten the neighbor, talking about the dictator and so on, Maduro. As if the people of Colombia would applaud an invasion of their brother, which is not the president, but the people of Venezuela. When would we ever be so treacherous and sold out, betraying our own blood, or the people of Ecuador, or the people of Panama, or the people of Venezuela? They are our own people. So they want the president to do what that coward David, to do what that coward, Doge wanted to do, to lend Colombia's land. So from there, they could invade a brother country that shares the same history as us. Because Bolivar was born there and came to die here in the city. That's the guy who liberated them from Spain. It cannot be, as a president of Colombia that would do that, be cursed by future generations, because you would never be forgotten as a traitor. I do not want to belong to those who wanted to kill Bolivar. The government of Venezuela has made many criticisms, but I do not mock the people of Venezuela, nor would I set a trap for the people of Venezuela to fall into the trap of an invasion that is only about their oil, driven by greed and violence, to turn this beautiful corner of South America into another Syria, another Iraq, another Libya full of slaves, slave trading, and new forms of slavery. Epstein's list, his friends, those who don't want the list to come out to be published in the United States, they want to use us here with violence so that the people of the United States don't think about their own government, but instead get consumed by xenophobia, racism, ideas of racial superiority, and other false beliefs. And they use us to avoid addressing their own problems. The president of Colombia has spent decades denouncing drug traffickers, and the drug traffickers he has denounced have always been the ruling elite in Colombia. They've been ruling the state. And then I think he goes on to boast that he's been rounding all those people up and arresting them and sending them back to extraditing them to America for prosecution. And, you know, that is a really interesting little point. You have at the same time the U.S. Senate to consider war powers resolution to block strike on Venezuela. This is from last week. U.S. senators are due to vote on a resolution on Thursday that could keep President Donald Trump from attacking Venezuela without congressional authorization, a day after administration officials told lawmakers that Washington did not yet have a legal justification for strikes on Venezuelan territory. I can tell you that the vote failed. So Trump maintained his ability to launch strikes against Venezuela. I should read this sentence though, because I made a joke about this at GART. Trump has dangled the possibility of land attacks on Venezuela for weeks, saying at one point that he had authorized the Central Intelligence Agency to conduct covert operations in the country. And I pointed out at GART the stupidity of the narrative that the president of the United States, you know, I said my favorite kind of covert operations are the ones where the president comes out and announces to everyone, I have authorized the CIA to conduct covert operations in Venezuela. Like, if you believe the story, you are an idiot. Yeah. Okay. Like, it's right there in the sentence. I have authorized the CIA to conduct covert operations. And then at the same time, last week, we had Maduro come out and say, we've arrested a bunch of CIA operatives trying to launch an amphibious invasion of our country, and we've arrested them. And it's like,
yeah, I don't remember if with you, I don't remember if I covered Trump announcing the operations or if we covered the false flag, but we covered both of those things here on Daily. And I was just like blown away. Like we literally have a president now announcing, you know, the Operation Northwood Gladio, you know, type operations that we've been conducting in these areas. That was fascinating to me.
Yeah. I know we're up against the clock, but I think this last headline will just round it all out, because this is an echo of what Petro said when he went to the UN back in late September, early October. This is from Lavrov. It says, U.S. should fight drugs in narco state of Belgium instead of Venezuela. Lavrov. It says the U.S. would be better off targeting Belgium, recently described as an emerging narco state by one of its own judges, rather than bombing small vessels off the coast of Venezuela. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Tuesday. Speaking at a press conference, Lavrov denounced the maritime airstrikes authorized by the administration of Donald Trump, which Washington claims are aimed at drug smugglers operating in the Caribbean. The foreign minister called the attacks acts taken without due process that demonstrate how the U.S. places itself above the law. Quote, rather than targeting Nigeria and Venezuela with anti-drug operations and seizures of oil fields, the U.S. should probably focus on eradicating the social ill in Belgium. The U.S. already has troops there and will not have to chase after small boats with crews of 3 people each. And yeah, he's referring to a recent statement by a Belgian judge who wrote to the parliament that mafia-like structures have taken root in the country and that it is not an exaggeration to say we are evolving into a narco state. And that is exactly what Petro said about the U.S. at the UN. He said, I find it very ironic that the U.S. is saying they're going to wage war against the drug cartels what about all the people in DC who are on the payroll of the drug cartels? Are you going to wage war on them too? So, and I think the answer to that is yes, we are going to wage war on them. It's just a different kind of war, and informing everybody and getting them all aware of it is step one. So
that would be fascinating to see U.S. troops marching on Brussels.
Yeah. It's because the mafia, the cartels control Brussels, they control Washington, they control London. They are the corporatists. The people who traffic kids and traffic drugs and traffic guns are the same people who manipulate stock prices and establish all the regulatory agencies and do all the stuff that we were talking about earlier with the insurance companies.
Yeah. All right. I know we do have a hard stop coming up here, so let me just run through these rants again. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Smash that thumbs up. Helps us out so much if you hit that thumbs up. It is Veterans Day, so happy Veterans Day to all of our fellow vets out there. Lee Walden, thank you guys. Ghost, you're right about the Trodkanen laws. Medbez just called it. Get back to common law. Just said it right. Common law versus maritime law. The communists are dug in like ticks.
They sure are, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Zigzag, how much are the soda companies getting from daddy government? Probably why price for a case has doubled in 7 years. Fuck yeah, they are. They're making money hand over fist off of that.
Yep.
I think it's like $2 or $3 billion a year they get off of government subsidies. The government subsidizes anything, prices skyrocket for the normal people. Lee Walden, after the failing insurance companies between Helene, Texas, you name a weather event fires in California, the insurance companies got the biggest grift of all. Yes, absolutely. Happy Veterans Day, Lee. He's a coastie. We get into arguments. I've hung out with Lee many times at GART. So Lee, great to hear from you. Happy Veterans Day to everybody. And thanks for the boost for the rants. Yes. Illinois Danny saluting and honoring our vets today. Danny. I don't know if she necessarily wants Illinois attached. I'm just kidding. Saluting and honoring our veterans today. Thank you for your service, Can, and thank you to those in the chat who have served. Rest in peace to all who have fallen, especially my friend Sergeant CBP 315, March 15th, 2009. Fair winds and following seas, brother. And thank you so much to everybody out there. Smash that thumbs up. Happy Veterans Day. Gordon, you got anything coming up?
This afternoon, 2:00, Geopolitics with Ghost.
All right. Again, smash that thumbs up, guys. A little over 3,600 watching. I think we peaked around 4,000 and only 1.08 thousand thumbs up. We could do much, much better than that. Thank you guys all so much. Gordon, I know you got to get out of here, so skedaddle. See you later, brother.
Later, man.
Before skincare went synthetic, people used something simple, something real. Tallow. Grass-fed and finished beef tallow is packed with vitamins A, D, E, and K. Nutrients your skin actually knows what to do with. It locks in moisture, restores elasticity, and defends against winter dryness. No water, no preservatives, and no BS. Unlike plant oils or chemical creams, tallow mimics your skin's own structure. Elbows, hands, knees, post-shave, anywhere your skin's crying for real moisture. Perfect for gifting or keeping your own skin soft when the cold hits. Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code Badlands for 15% off. Ancient Care, modern truth.